Welcome to the Migraine Miracle Moment. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Turknet. I'm a neurologist, migraine specialist, migraine sufferer, and author of the book, The Migraine Miracle. In this podcast, you'll learn all about how to find your path to migraine freedom without pills. Let's get started. Howdy, Beast Slayers. So as some of you may know, we are about to launch another Keto Blast, which is our 30-day keto challenge for migraineurs. That challenge will launch this weekend, and there is still time to register if you're interested. So you can go to ketoformigraine.com. That's KETOFOR migraine.com to learn more and to sign up. And if you happen to be there past the sign-up date, you'll see the date for our next challenge. And we recently posted about it on our Facebook page, and in the comments to that post, we received a really good question, and I thought it would be worthy of answering on a short podcast episode. So the question that came in our comment from Diane was, how does doing the keto challenge help long-term if you aren't in ketosis all the time? Sounds like you go in and out of ketosis. And that's true. I personally do go in and out of ketosis. And this is a really good question, a very sensible one. Basically, what she's asking here is, if you do keto or stay in nutritional ketosis for 30 days or even longer, and even if you do really great, if you stop, won't you just essentially go back to where you were before you started? And if that's the case, then what's the value over the long term of cycling in and out of ketosis? Again, a very reasonable question. And I decided it would be worth doing a short episode to answer it because I think the answer to this question gets at a really fundamental principle that's important to understand, not just for using a ketogenic diet and nutritional ketosis for migraines, but also for just how we approach slaying the beast generally and even our overall health. It kind of highlights a principle that's largely been overlooked in the traditional approach to migraines, which, as you know, I refer to as the old story of migraine. And that principle is that I think the natural tendency for most of us is to think of ourselves and of our body and our biology as this fixed and unchanging thing. When we look in the mirror each morning, we're pretty much the same as we were yesterday, so it seems like we're pretty much the same thing day in and day out. And the discovery of DNA and the science of genetics, I think, has also had the result or the impact of reinforcing this idea, which I've touched on in prior episodes. And that's that our DNA sort of contains this blueprint for who we are, that we're constructed from that blueprint, and that's essentially what we are from then on out. So kind of like if you were to build a kitchen table, you might draw out some plans, that's your DNA, you gather the materials and assemble the table, and then from that point on, the table is essentially the same table day in and day out. But the reality is that's not at all what we're like or what any biological system is like. We're changing all the time at all different levels of organization, even all the way down to the levels of our genes. And those changes are driven in large part by our environment and our behaviors. And you're a different person, in the morning than you are in the evening, and from one day to the next. And we've always known this to be true to some degree, but in the past decade or so, we've discovered, I think, that it's even more true than we realized, that, as I've talked about in prior episodes, we can control everything down to our DNA, including how our genes are expressed. And so if we are always in flux, and that change is shaped largely by our environment and our behaviors, which we have a good degree of control over, then it makes good sense for us to want to understand as best as possible how to steer that change in the direction we want it to go. And even if we were just to limit this discussion of the change inside of us from day to day, if we were just to limit that to the gut microbiome, the amount of change just in that segment of us is staggering, and we've only just begun to understand all the various ways that those changes impact our health and how we can shape that change intelligently. So anyhow, with that prelude in mind, let's get back to our original question, which, if you recall, was how does doing the keto challenge help long-term if you aren't in ketosis all the time? Essentially, what's the long-term benefits of cycling in and out of keto, or for just doing a short-term test of a ketogenic diet? And in thinking about this question, I came up with 4 what I think are good reasons that would either apply to doing a 30-day trial of a ketogenic diet or cycling in and out of ketosis generally. So the first reason is simply to learn how ketosis affects you. I've said before that I think every migraineur should try ketosis at some point in their lives, though I think that actually applies to anyone, migraines or not, for reasons that I'll touch on in a minute. But what we know, because we've seen it so many times now, is that nutritional ketosis can be a powerful weapon against the beast for some people. And for many, it's been the catalyst that's really accelerated their progress on the road to migraine freedom. But of course, the only way to know if you respond particularly well to it, at least at this day and age, is to test it for yourself. So in my view, given the potentially huge upside, giving it a try at some point is essentially a no-brainer, though there are good times to try it and less optimal times to try it, which I've discussed previously. Having done it myself many times and knowing its impact on me, I really love now knowing that it's something that I can always fall back on when I need to. I feel like I have this secret weapon in my back pocket that I can use when necessary. So that's the first reason, simply learning how ketosis affects you. The second would be to help kickstart fat adaptation and metabolic flexibility. So the transition into nutritional ketosis involves a whole host of physiological changes all the way down to the cellular level as the body upregulates its ability to mobilize fat, to generate and burn ketone bodies for energy. And these are precisely the same sorts of changes that are needed to support metabolic flexibility, which is the ability to readily or efficiently shift between glucose or stored fat for energy. And if you recall from the 3 pillars of migraine freedom episodes, establishing metabolic flexibility is one of the 3 pillars of migraine freedom because we've seen so many dramatic improvements once sort of that milestone is reached. And nutritional ketosis is like stepping on the gas pedal for all the physiologic changes and the enzymatic machinery that's required for metabolic flexibility. And going back to my early point about being able to change ourselves all the way down to the expression of our genes, this transition into ketosis includes changes in gene expression, which allows you to increase the transcription of the proteins that are needed to carry out all the physiologic processes that support nutritional ketosis. And so back to the original question is what we've learned both from our own experiences and from the scientific research is that even if you increase your daily carbohydrates and you exit ketosis after doing it for a period of time, that the adaptations that were stimulated still persist. And they seem to persist for a long time, particularly if you continue to adhere to an ancestral low to moderate carbohydrate, nutrient-dense diet, or essentially a diet that's appropriate for a human. And if you're in the Migraine Miracle community, then I'm assuming that's what you're doing anyways. I recall years ago, the first time I did a ketogenic diet, I essentially was switching from a standard American diet. And so the transition that I experienced then was pretty significant. And that's because it was something that my body hadn't done before and wasn't prepared for. And because I was shifting from a pretty different physiological state. But now, even if I'm not in ketosis for weeks or even months, I can get back into it really easily and with 0 transitional symptoms. So I think the situation here is kind of like learning to ride a bike. You know, once that motor memory has been constructed and internalized in the brain, it's a part of you, literally. And even if you don't ride a bike for years, the brain can still call up that memory when needed. So in other words, the physiological benefits of even a short-term course of a ketogenic diet seem to continue to persist even after you're no longer in ketosis. So again, that's another way in which cycling in and out can continue to help you even when you're no longer in ketosis. The third reason is that you'll learn a lot from doing it. So doing the sort of monitoring of macronutrients, so protein, fat, and carbohydrates in food that's needed to enter and remain in ketosis is a really great education about the nutritional content of food. and you're bound to learn a lot in that process. Just the other day, my wife Jenny was saying that it wasn't really until she did a keto diet and had to sort of be so mindful of carbohydrate content that she fully appreciated the amount of carbs in various foods, specifically in certain fruits and vegetables, and that knowing this since then has really allowed her to make better and more informed decisions about what to eat and sort of where to spend her carbohydrate allotment. And then the fourth reason for cycling in and out of ketosis would be the other potential health benefits that come from it. So I've said in the past that I'd be cycling in and out of ketosis from here on out, essentially, even if it had no effect on my migraines. One reason for that is because I like the way I feel in ketosis, but another is because of all the emerging evidence of its benefits in protecting and possibly even treating certain conditions, especially neurodegenerative illnesses like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's. As a neurologist, I certainly know firsthand the devastation that things like that can bring, and I certainly want to do everything in my own power to prevent that sort of thing for myself. But there's also research that would support the idea that it's protective against certain kinds of cancers and even a potential treatment for certain types of cancers. I think it's also a reasonable thing as a protection against any problems with glucose dysregulation down the road or diabetes. So certainly a reasonable thing for anyone who's at risk for cancers, diabetes, neurodegenerative illnesses like Alzheimer's. It's something that I've urged all of my immediate family to do, including my parents, simply for the health benefits and because I want them to live a long and healthy life or give them the best odds of doing so. And I think cycling in and out of ketosis is an essential part of that. Again, given the fact that there are huge potential upsides and really no downside risks, in fact, people typically feel really great in ketosis. It's, again, kind of a no-brainer. So those are 4 really good reasons, in my opinion, for both doing a 30-day or longer trial of nutritional ketosis and for cycling in and out of it indefinitely. Like I said earlier, it's just so important to understand that we have so much potential to shape our own physiology. And if you do a 30-day trial of keto, you'll be a fundamentally different person after that's over than you were going in, regardless of whether you continue to stay in ketosis after that period of time. And we've seen so many people who've used the Keto Blast to kickstart their progress on the road to migraine freedom. And the fact that they didn't just revert back to their prior migraine frequency after they were done with the challenge, again, supports this idea that you are fundamentally different afterwards than you were going into it. All right, so that concludes this episode. Thanks to Diane again for that great question. And just as a reminder that our Keto Blast launches this weekend, you can sign up through the end of the weekend. We use the Saturday and Sunday to kind of get ready for it. And to learn more and to register or to see when the next one is, if you've missed this one, you can go to ketoformigraine.com, which will also be linked in the show notes. And again, if you want to see the show notes for this episode, as well as listen to any of the prior episodes, you can go to mymigrainemiracle.com/moment. And if you like this podcast and you want to help us reach more people with it, it would be awesome if you left a rating or review on iTunes. All right, that's all for today. Go out there and slay the beast.